Welcome, everyone. Good to see you all. It's Career Happy Hour. Every Friday, 3 o'clock Pacific time, we come together as a community and we support each other as we go through our search process to find the perfect opportunities quickly. That means that each one of you that shows up here is part of that community. And I really want you to add, if you would, in the chat, your LinkedIn profile. We'll get started here in just a second. Any questions that you have certainly could be put up. I want to see those in the chat as well. Any questions regarding your career, whether you're working or not, is open game in the chat. Now, you could also use the, let's see, live coaching. There's a live coaching link also in the description. If you didn't want to make public your question, you could certainly join me live in that session, but you don't have to come on live. But you and I can then have private chats. And so if you don't want, if you want to maintain some confidentiality, you could do that as well. Either way is perfectly acceptable to me. So who am I? I'm Andrew Beach. I'm a teacher of self-education. I help professionals like you communicate their value to find great opportunities faster, whether you're working or not. I do that through a pragmatic process of branding, planning, and effective networking. Those three legs of the stool account for 85% plus of the success in job search. It's the old, hey, you have to know what you want first, and then you go find who needs it second. It's a lot like sales, really. We talk about that a little bit here. Again, so if you're just joining, please share your LinkedIn profile in the chat if you're comfortable doing so. In sharing that profile, you are saying to everyone that, yes, I want you to contact me. And yes, I am open to networking if you ask. That's what that means. We're trying to lubricate, if you will, facilitate, remove the friction from actually having dialogues, conversations, live conversations with people you don't yet know, but probably should. Good. And then I'd also call out that if you're interested, you could certainly join. Let's see. I have a podcast. Let me get over to the stream here, and I'll put the link to the podcast in the chat. Let me mute this tab first. And because here's the thing, there's a lot of tools and such available to everyone here. But if you're the type, actually, I'll put it in the description here. Let's see, is it going to let me edit the description because we're live? Yeah, we can. There we go. Good. So I will put this link at the top because I want you to join me live. And let's see. Oh, okay, that works. And then I'll also put the sorry about that. And then I'll put the podcast in here. Podcast. Jobseekersradio.com. I'll put that in the chat as well. There we go. And then in the chat here, there we are. Okay. So you should see now the link in the description is right at the top. That's how you join me live in this session if you want a private chat instead of, making everything super public here. I will honor your confidentiality in a private chat in the green room, as we call it. You'll be put into a green room, and I think up to 6 or 8 people. I wonder how many people 10 guests. I can have 10 guests on the stream. So if you want to come in, we could have some good times here and hang out. So that's in the description. And if you have questions about career, I know it's a 3-day weekend. Here's the challenge with the 3-day weekend. I think, and I don't know that it's a challenge, but it's a reality, at least for most people or some people, maybe in your circles. What I'm finding is these 3-day weekends, people are doing a staycation. They're exhausted and they want to travel somewhere, but they just don't have the, how would you say it? The energy to do that. And this is going to be some great, at least in our neck of the woods, is going to be some really good weather. And that means people for the first time, maybe working in their yard or getting out and doing things. But I haven't heard of anybody that's traveling anywhere And certainly, I haven't heard of many people, although this may be an exception, that are traveling by air. Many of them going by car. And that's still, I think, something that's going to happen here, at least in the near term, is people will be traveling by car. And so if we start thinking about all these things, where do you think the opportunities are for people in the marketplace? Well, certainly logistics, supply chain is going to continue to be a strong area. So if you have expertise in logistics, supply chain, getting good products and services to a place they need to be when they need to be there, then you're in a good spot. The other thing I could see here is if you are in the automotive or rental car business, because some people just aren't driving all that much, and if they're going to do a trip or something, they might rent a car. And I think you can get cars pretty cheap nowadays, at least in terms of the rentals, unless you're looking for a U-Haul and you want to take that U-Haul from a state like California to a state like Texas, then it's very expensive. So if you have any questions, certainly put those in the chat. So that's something I'm thinking about. It's a holiday weekend. So if people are indeed going to be hanging around, what do you think they might be doing on Monday? Short trips. In our area, I think Memorial Day is like one of those holidays that people go out and they do wine tasting, or they just do day trips to the beach, that sort of thing. I also think many people will be headed to the home improvement centers, and the weather's going to be really nice, kind of hot. I think the beach is going to be really crowded. And so what difference does that make, Andrew? What's the big deal there? Well, it's an opportunity to put ourselves in a position to network. So we can go to some of those places where people are hanging out and just strike up conversations. I know that's kind of weird and somewhat haphazard, but the other part of this is if people are indeed staying in town and they're not going anywhere, then likely if I contacted them on Monday, they might just be chilling out around the house. I could reach out to them maybe on LinkedIn. Maybe they're checking their LinkedIn. It's one of the times where maybe they access LinkedIn is on a holiday like this. A lot of people I know, they just don't pay attention to their LinkedIn. So good to see you, Leif. Nice to have you in today's session. Looks like we have plenty of people here. So if you do, please put your questions in the chat. I don't like to talk ad nauseum during this whole thing. So if you want to come on, give me a break from speaking. You can ask me your questions directly. We'll come on video, provide you some hands-on coaching. I do this as a service. This is a community. I'm here to provide support for those of you who need it. So I would like to see who needs some support. And certainly if you would, share it out to your networks. We want to expand this little community and make it better. Also, I think I see Leif has done this. If you would, please just plop your LinkedIn profile in the chat so that people know that you're here and that you're open to networking. And if they reach out, you will say yes. So please do that. So I did have some things on my mind this week. Hi, Leif. I have a sense that the economy is improving, and many of you may have seen that too. I don't know what the staying power is for that, but I think there's certainly something to be said for the injection of capital through the government, at least in the United States, however many billions or trillions of dollars, that's certainly helping. And so I get a sense because people are now getting offers, they're getting interviews, and there's a lot of, I think is still a lot of disruption in the marketplace, but I'm just getting a sense that the economy is improving from what has happened or occurred during the pandemic. I also believe that people are starting to, but haven't yet, are starting to re-engage with travel. A lot of the companies that are in that industry have taken a very cautious, sometimes overly, compliant with government regulations in terms of how they're going back to market. I think of some of the cruise lines and, all these organizations that are, thinking about reopening only if people can demonstrate that they have had the vaccine. So I don't know if that's something that's coming or not, but I certainly think it's a lot of compliance issues for a lot of organizations. Is how are they going to do that? How are they going to maintain compliance, check people's status, and how do we know those are legitimate and if they're not? And I think it's just a lot of liability that may or may not be good for people to see. Good to see you, Charmaine. Excellent. Lisa, good to see you as well. Excellent. Keith is here. Excellent. Yeah, it looks like we have a good crowd. So please feel free to connect with each other offline outside of this weekly event. But if you have any burning questions about your career, whether that's including interviewing or planning your market, networking, building a professional personal brand, anything related to LinkedIn, that would be great. Hi, Zai. Good to see you. Did your LinkedIn profile come through okay? I don't know if that's the proper link, but you might want to check that. It looks kind of funny. Anyhow, so I also am getting the impression that a lot of organizations are saying, okay, if you have had a vaccine, you no longer have to wear masks in our facilities or what have you. So I think people are getting more comfortable as we, not entirely comfortable, becoming more comfortable without masks. And so I see that, again, as a part of the work disruption that a lot of organizations are going to have to work through. And, certainly when you get into coming on board to a new organization or a new context, you really need to understand what are your requirements there and what makes you feel safe and how do they feel and what is their policy so that when you come on board, you feel good about being a member of that team. Good. Thank you. Of course, we can see that you're here, Sai. So you could, people could just click on your profile, I suppose, or your image there. But it's just nice for people off of LinkedIn, if they're visiting from YouTube or some other resource, they can also click that link. So hopefully it works. Good. And that said, mask or no mask, vaccine, no vaccine, companies still have, I think, some decisions, some choices to make as they start transitioning back to working at the office. And that brings up some questions about negotiate. To negotiate, to not negotiate. What do we negotiate? Is there certain things we want to add when we think about the offers we're getting? Sometimes we're just really happy to get an offer, and so we don't negotiate. Other times we get an offer and we feel like, gosh, I should negotiate, but I'm not real comfortable with that. It's okay. I mean, I think many people aren't used to or aren't comfortable with, or in some ways have never had the experience of negotiating a job offer in their lifetime. Maybe they could count on one hand how many times they've done that. That's why I think it's really critical that if you need support like that from a coach, that you get some feedback on that, and how you go forward with your decision to negotiate or not is certainly entirely up to you. But the idea is the one time that you have to negotiate the right compensation and terms and conditions, et cetera, for you is when you get the offer. After you've accepted an offer, guess what? Negotiations are over, likely for at least a year. Now, if someone is kind and gives you a bump in 6 months, or you've gotten lucky to work for an organization that recognizes your talent and sees that you actually performed well and gave you a bonus or an increase in pay, then in that 6 months, then you're lucky, right? You're really lucky. Many times, though, it's going to be a year before you can go back to that well and ask for more. And now you have a whole year of saying, did I make a mistake? Did I not make a mistake? I'm working hard, and hopefully they see it. And now you're crossing your fingers. And in my perspective is crossing your fingers is not a strategy. Each one of us ought to have some kind of an idea about what's important to us, what's negotiable and what's not. Even if we really need a job, there has to be some line that you draw and say, okay, this is acceptable or it's not acceptable. And if it isn't acceptable, then we need to negotiate those terms. But it's got me thinking that people certainly don't think like me. And as a coach, I have to be flexible in the way I approach things. And it's really kind of reminded me that people make decisions differently, and they have different things that are important to them. And when they make those decisions, that certainly is something they get to live with. But, it's made me really curious about how do people make decisions? And that can apply not just in negotiations, but in the workplace, in people you're trying to network with. How do they make a decision to say yes or no to meeting you for a network meeting? I think I would like to know that. I would like to discern what's important to them so that I can make that conversation fruitful, for sure. But how do you make decisions? Some people certainly make decisions based on emotion. Certainly, emotion is part of decision making. In fact, emotion is part of the reason many people make decisions, whether that's fear, that's an emotion, whether it's, how would you say it? Vanity, I suppose, is kind of a borderline emotion. Self-fulfillment, selfishness. There's a lot of reasons why people make decisions that they do. So, but how do you make decisions? And are you aware of how you make decisions so that you can see and know that your decision is maybe a little bit better than what you would have made if you didn't take the time to understand, if that makes sense. Hopefully it makes sense. That said, if you have any questions, please put those in the chat. I want to see the questions. I want to provide you some kind of support here today so that you can walk away with some value. Outside of that, I've just gotten in the habit of really just reading the news as LinkedIn sees it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's all right. Let me maximize that, make it a little easier on us here. Okay. All right. So here we are on LinkedIn. Let's see what is in the news. This is the news, all the news that's fit to print. Make it bigger for y'all. You can buy happiness responsibly. That's a stretch. LinkedIn must be reaching. Anyway, let's see. The great reopening of the U.S. economy is giving way to a nationwide spending binge. Well, that's not a shocker. If people have utilized and appreciated the first two stimulus checks, then the third check might have just been, hey, gravy, and either put it in savings or spend it on something frivolous. I know a lot of people have done that. Now, each of us has decisions to make there as well, but it says here, with the vaccine rollout boosting customers' willingness to go to restaurants or stores and dish out some cash, for those looking to spend some spare money, a New York Times piece suggests buying experiences, which tend to bring more satisfaction and less remorse than just buying stuff. While some might not be ready to buy concert or plane tickets, planning day trips, movie dates, and dinners with family and friends are always to spend on experiences. I think, you know what? Don't we always buy experiences, honestly, with an employer, with a company or a restaurant? We're always spending on experience. Now, certainly, if you're not treated well and the food is bad, the experience isn't good. And if the experience isn't good, you're likely not going to come back. That's just common sense. I think we're all buying experiences. And for the last year and a half, most of our experiences have been from the grocery store to the house or from the house to the grocery store. That's not an experience. So many of us have been experience-less for the last year and a half. We've been creating our own experiences, and that can create fatigue. And I know that for a fact. So looks like we have Charmaine here in the, let's see. All right. Oh, you're testing it out. Did you want to come on live? Let me see if she says yes. It doesn't look like she's activated her camera, but we'll see. Good. So that's you can buy happiness. I think you can buy happiness. You can't buy joy. That's a different feeling altogether. Okay, here's an interesting one. Many of you may know, or maybe you don't, that I used to sell real estate for a lot of years. And I always find these things kind of interesting, what people are doing when they're not, let's see, just a second here. There we go. What people are doing when they're not going to an office. And so a lot of people I know, they added a shed to their property, and in the shed was an office. A lot of people did that. A lot of people remodeled a portion of their home to accommodate an office or a learning space for their kids. And so it looks like work from home gives rise to the cloffice. I guess that's a mashup of the closet office. The cloffice, a closet that doubles as an office. The concept isn't new, but it's now it's big. The boom of work from home and online learning during the pandemic forced people to get creative in makeshift workspaces. Now, I think there's another, just by the way, I think there's another article in here about generational occupations, right? So what does that mean? That means that you're multiple generations, kids, let's say they graduated college, they went off out of the state, got their first job, and now they're like, well, it's a pandemic. I'm paying a lot of money in rent. Why don't I just go live at home during the pandemic? I can work from home. I don't have to be at the office. I'll just move in with the parents and I'll sock away as much money as I can, or pay down my debts, or whatever the deal is. So we're seeing multiple generations, 2, 3, 4 generations living together, distant, perhaps extended family living together to save money. So I think that's interesting. It's fascinating to watch. So it says here, Cloffice has popped up on Pinterest and Instagram, sparking inspiration for how to separate work and living space, especially for those in small apartments looking for privacy. They cleared out their closets to make room for desk sets and emptied their shelves for work files. Yeah, I mean, that would be an easy way to add space if you had a closet that was big enough to do so. I'm sure many people don't have a closet of that size, which they could actually utilize. So good. So let's see what else we got for a news. Did someone say free samples? What's that all about? Costco. Businesses are slowly but surely making efforts to get us back to some form of normal. Movie theaters are seeing record sales. Restaurants are operating at full capacity. And Costco is bringing back its beloved free samples. Free samples, okay? The warehouse chain plans to revive its infamous food court as well in nearly 200 stores beginning early next month. Costco CFO says they've enhanced safety protocols so patrons can sample and dine with ease. The announcement comes as the company, per the Wall Street Journal, faces high costs amid unexpected inflation rates. That's interesting, high costs. Well, I guess, I had thought, and people here could probably confirm whether or not this is true, but I understand that Costco operates on a 10% margin, meaning, hey, they only mark up whatever they buy from whomever they buy it. They only mark it up 10%. But I mean, I could be wrong. Their Kirkland brands might be an exception to that rule. But if I'm off on that one, I thought that's how they got started. If you have a question about switching careers, go ahead and put it in the chat, please. I'd be happy to answer. So that's good news. I mean, I like to see that things are getting back to some semblance of normalcy. That doesn't mean people are going to respond in kind to Costco's decision to bring back free samples. They may continue to wear masks or avoid those things, but that's up to each person. If you're comfortable with it, then that, I suppose that's fine. Let's see. Coercing workers back to the office. I think this is kind of an extension of the conversation we had maybe a couple weeks ago. Decisions are now being made that will define or redefine working people's lives the world over, whether to return back to the commute, the office, and pre-pandemic work life. Yeah, I think what we are seeing is that the statistics were telling us that in the neighborhood of 25% of any company's workforce across the board, 25% of the people would probably quit if they were asked to go back to the office. Many workers, especially those on laptops, have the freedom to choose less scheduled, more family flexible lifestyles in location they've always wanted to live. Some CEOs and managers are skeptical because they're driven by profits, not by other motives. Anyway, that's just a generality. So don't take that for what, take that for what it's worth. Others won't give the choice, but a recent article on LinkedIn by Industrious CEO Jamie Hodari argues that coercing employees back to work won't work. In the long run, higher productivity is likely found through more freedom to choose. Yeah, I mean, there has to be a balance there for sure. So I can see both sides of that equation. I really appreciate the capacity or the flexibility to work from home. I also appreciate getting together with my colleagues, my coworkers, my clients. There's just something missed. I don't know if that's kinesthetic or some sort of spiritual thing but I think there is different energy when you're meeting people in person. There's no doubt in my mind. And we all need that. We weren't, I don't think we were born in a vacuum or a bubble, and we were born into community with other people. And I believe that at some point that's going to return to normal. Now, is that going to be in an office? Maybe, maybe not. I think we've talked a lot about flexible work arrangements. I see here the WeWork CEO. Man, that guy got a good deal. Anyway, we can talk about that. But anyway, I find it fascinating that right now commercial real estate is down, but a lot of these flexible work arrangements haven't spun up because these companies haven't made a commitment to go back to an office of any kind. So I could see a lot of opportunity for companies like WeWork or Regus to get more market share there, more business. So anyway, I don't think coercing employees to do anything is a good idea. That's just my my perspective. Interesting. Cities want to tear down highways. So if you have skills in some of these places, right? So let's look at this as an example. If a city wanted to tear down a highway, what kind of people would they need? Well, they need construction companies, they need engineers, they need project managers, right? So if there's a lot of companies or cities or counties or states looking at these things, then that is opportunity. So we need to look at each one of these news reports as an opportunity to what? To understand your marketplace better, to know what is in play and what isn't, so you know where to focus your time, and then to decide which companies and people you should talk to this next week. Friday is a great day to do that, by the way, making some choices on which companies and who to talk to, and start thinking about and gathering information on people that you can meet with next week, knowing that it's a short week and a lot of people are going to be happy because they had some time off. Anyway. Good. So let's see what this says. Highway building in the 1950s and 60s America, disconnected communities grew dependence on automobile, and even worse, in structural racism by dividing Black communities, according to the New York Times. That's an interesting opening. Doesn't sound like a very well articulated, grammatically correct sentence. Anyway, I'm not one to judge. Yet it also represented a booming economy and a growing population. Recent activism and a potential federal infrastructure bill have reawakened calls for more density, less car dependence, and more walkable neighborhoods. And many U.S. cities are now considering taking down their highways and reimagining communities that become disconnected and lifeless. Interesting. I don't know if there's anything to say about that. I think a lot of states and cities have decisions to make on how they plan their growth. That just goes without saying. You have to have space for business. You have to have space for living, recreation. I mean, there's lots of spaces that need delineation and protection. That's just normal. How far you go with that, I think, is a challenge, because then you can restrict the highest and best use of any piece of property. Anyway, that's another discussion altogether. Let's see what else we have here. WeWork, viral post. Google Pay clash goes class action. Interesting. Let's see what Google Pay has to say here. Clash goes class action. 4 former Google employees won class action status in their gender pay disparity lawsuit against the tech giant. A California state judge is letting 4 women who are lead plaintiffs represent 10,800 women over claims that men were paid more for doing similar work. The case in 2017, $600 million in damages. Yeah, I mean, you know what? I think that's all great. That's all equivalent. But for me, the challenge is class action. So not to diminish the value of what they're fighting for, but my challenge has always been, when people seek class action, the only winners truly are the original plaintiffs and the lawyers. So anyway, because once you join a class action, that all the legal fees go to support that. So let's see. So that's food delivery apps hungry for profit. Yeah, I mean, I guess the other thing that I noticed here recently is that there was an article, I think I saw it, about the lack of drivers, meaning Uber and Lyft and all these other services like DoorDash, Grubhub, etc. They didn't have enough drivers. Why? Because people were not excited about having strangers in their car during a pandemic. So now that people are getting a little more comfortable with the vaccination statuses and moving forward with the PPE and doing those kind of things, I think it's just going to be really interesting for these companies to maintain their numbers if they can't get drivers. I mean, their whole lifeblood is on the fact that people will actually come and drive for them at at a price that allows them to make a profit. So let's see. Looks like I have a question in the chat here. I have been building my career in event planning and marketing for 8 years. I tried to switch from events to sales and marketing, still event heavy. It's been difficult to make the switch as my resume is events marketing focused. Do you have any recommendations on highlighting transferable skills on resume so it will get noticed more? Okay. Yeah, I mean, Charmaine, if you want to come on live, I'm happy to do that. But I just read out your question here. So hopefully it's okay that I shared it. If you come into the private chat, please let me know whether or not you want that to be confidential. So, but since Charmaine had already put her information in the chat here, I think that was okay. So, so here's the thing. Whenever I've made a lot of career transitions in my life and done a lot of career change. So I know a little bit of something about this. And the challenge that a lot of us have is we think that our presentations on paper are going to qualify us for what we want to do next. And that is partially true. The challenge with that isn't the fact that you aren't qualified. It's the approach to getting the opportunity. The approach through, online applications, using your resume, crossing your fingers, is about 8 to 10% successful, even if you're extremely qualified. So regardless of how qualified you are, you can expect somewhere between 8 to 10% return on investment of online application resume work. That means that the networking becomes even more critical to your success, where you can demonstrate your marketing, your sales, the things that you are good at in the domain that you want to work in. People will now vouch for you because they've met you firsthand, first person. Now, that does mean you need to get really comfortable doing things that are uncomfortable, like turning on your camera and having a conversation with someone that you haven't met before about them, their company, their career path, how they got from, say, event planning into sales. And there's lots of people that do that kind of work. The bigger question is who's running events right now, and are those virtual, and who are the players and that sort of thing. So identifying a target that's actually got some work for you to do, I think is going to be the bigger challenge. And so what would I suggest? Well, I think WeWork or Regus or some of these other firms that are trying to get people to go into their spaces, I think this would be a great time to do some awareness events, maybe even some events around getting people to try it out, a try and buy kind of thing. Maybe give somebody bring in some, do an event to attract people to your space. That to me would be kind of interesting. So I think that's it for the news. Now, the other thing I want to demonstrate here, just so you guys know, is that LinkedIn comes out with news every day. So here I can see my own live stream. But when I come down here, they have something called the daily rundown. And so what I would advocate is when you come into LinkedIn, see what is, top of mind for the leadership at LinkedIn. And that's often driven by this editorial staff. Okay. And you can now share out some of this stuff. You can read some of this stuff and you can see, hey, here's some of the stories that we just talked about. Idea of the day, be optimistic, right? So there's more top news. So there's more than one way. So that comes out daily. That comes out daily. And that's something that's easily accessed. Good. Thank you, Leif, for the question. Let's see what it says. FYI, I hadn't heard about this previously. COBRA is being paid until September by American Rescue Plan. Yes, we talked about that, I think, when this last set of stimulus came through. We actually talked about that. Yeah. So they should be covering a portion of your COBRA during those times. Absolutely. And anybody can look that up. Just do a Google search on that for sure. You're welcome, Charmaine. My pleasure. If that was helpful, I sure hope so. But I think a part of this is just looking at the companies you'd like to work for and go talk to people at those companies. It's not, I'm not telling you something you probably don't already know. It's just giving yourself permission to have a conversation with a stranger and seeing what happens, or getting a introduction to somebody from people you trust. So go to the people you trust first. I'm always an advocate of start with the people you know first. That's where the networking is really the best and the easiest. So that's that. Any other questions? Certainly put those in the chat. Happy to answer. That's why I'm here. If there's anything you want to piggyback on that, what we've already talked about, that would be great. And I'd be happy to support anybody if they want to come on live. That link is also in the description. It's free. There's no charge. You don't have to have LinkedIn Premium service. You won't receive an invoice. Everything you get from me is completely free during this Friday session. And we've been going about half an hour. Some of the ones before were going closer to an hour because people had great questions. And they were really flexible in sharing that information. So I certainly appreciate that very much. Let's see here. Any questions from anybody? Hopefully there are some questions. Otherwise, we'll call it a day. And I'll wish you a great holiday weekend. At least here in the States, we have Memorial Day. So it's a good time to remember and reflect on those that came before us. Okay, good. All right, everybody. I do appreciate you coming today. Every Friday, 3 o'clock Pacific time, Career Happy Hour. You're welcome to come in live. You're welcome to bring your questions. You're welcome to share it with a friend and bring them along. I'm just here to support your success. And if you have any questions at all, you could certainly private message me if you don't want them to be public. On top of that, you can see all these live streams. I share them and save them on YouTube. And so you can go back to YouTube and watch any one of those that you desire, or you could take advantage of our podcast, Job Seekers Radio. There's a lot of good content there. Yes, of course. You're welcome, Lisa. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next Career Happy Hour. Bye now.